Hello. The deed is done. The game is finished, and I thought I'd do a quick wrap up of the game, how it played out, final scores, and my conclusions as to what I feel about the game. I believe I was at January 44 at the conclusion of the last video, and I remember feeling pretty smug as the Germans that all was going well, what could possibly go wrong. I made some throwaway comment, unless the Red Hordes break through or something rather like that, which is actually what did happen in the summer of 44, assisted by the gods of weather, because we actually had 5 straight turns of good weather. There's about a 50-50 of getting fair weather on in the May and the June turns. Both of those were fair, and the Russians made rapid progress through their home country. However, when the weather turned, the line was able to be reformed by the Germans, and the other fronts were having similar success, particularly through Italy, which was arguably the most successful of the 3 Allied drives. There'd been some progress in France, fairly swift counterattacks by the Germans had already repulsed one of the invasions in Brest. The second invasion around Normandy was more effective, and the Germans gradually fought their way back, had a fighting retreat back to the West Wall, where they still pretty much are, to be honest. In terms of the final scores, I think the German national will was it dropped to about 26, so still pretty healthy, and the only real incursions into the homeland were the Allies managed to capture Strasbourg, which was recaptured by 6th SS Panzer Army. They've taken Munich with the drive up from Italy, and the Russians are, pushing on Königsberg. I suppose if you're being generous, getting into Poland. They conquered Romania. They declared war on Bulgaria to give themselves a slightly bigger front. Took out Bulgaria pretty much as soon as the troops had deployed, but still had problems fighting their way through the difficult terrain around Hungary and Romania, and the weather helps as well massively in this system. In terms of enjoyment, I'd say, I don't do most of my gaming solitaire. I tend to get a game set up, play a few turns to convince myself I at least know the rules, even if I'm not playing it very well. But with this game, it just drew me along. I was enjoying the ride. I suspect my German play is better than my Allied play. But as a solo experience for me, it's probably sort of second to none. I can't think of a game that I've enjoyed more. That's kind of kept my attention and my energy and focus for as long as this has. It's certainly not a short game. You've got 70 odd turns from start to finish. This was I guess a typical July 45 last turn. And the Germans are still certainly there in strength, although the last turn being a fair weather turn, it's just started to kind of creak a little bit. And clearly, if if the game was extended. There's no doubt as to who the winner would be, but of course in the time frame of the game, the Germans are the clear victors. Thoughts on the systems? I think the supply mechanics are very elegant. I like the sortie system. I think it works well for both the naval issues, the supply issues, and the aircraft. You can push them, push your assets if you're really trying to achieve something, but you know there's going to be a price to pay for that over the next few turns. The strategic bombing, which did have an effect. I forget when it happened, but sometime in 44, probably late 44, the German lost factories hit their maximum of 9, which essentially reduced their working production total to about 24 points a turn, which is not a lot, but when you don't have to move very much stuff. I mean, when the Russians broke through, they were using a lot of their points just to get the army moving, because they've got a lot of it, and since the upgrades, a fair bit of it is actually mechanised, so you're paying 2 production points per unit rather than 1. Whereas the Germans, they were able to pull back a bit and they gradually built back the Luftwaffe until they had 3 or 4 quite serviceable units. And what I found actually was on the Western Front in particular, where there were 2 American and 1 British sort of land-based air, the Germans decided to get sort of air superiority on the Western Front, where they were able to negate the American air assets by launching counter-strikes, which kind of felt a bit odd given the date of the game, but that's probably due to them not being pressurised early enough elsewhere, so they had this ability to spend their reserve points getting back the Air Force. It meant that they basically gave the initiative to the Allies in terms of air in Italy, and consequently the Allies pushed on quite well up through Italy. But they were able to cancel any Allied advantage in the West. Paid the price in the East for a bit, but even that in the end managed to stabilise. I think the only question mark I've got on the whole thing, and I've seen others make similar comments on Concern World and Board Game Geek, is the effect of the air on the system. Essentially you're going to have between 3 and 5 turns a year when a lot of stuff happens, and then the other 7 or 8 turns of the year not much is going to happen. And whilst I can understand that seems plausible in many respects, it just seems a little bit over the edge for me. The sort of, in terms of the poor weather, is almost worse than the severe weather. The -2 penalty to the attacker alone, as compared to both sides being halved for the severe weather, the -2 for the poor weather is a real operations killer. Now, I've only played the full campaign game once, but I'm just wondering if I was to do it again, would I consider making attacks in the poor weather maybe just -1 rather than -2? You are really being penalised for the poor weather in terms of air support's only +1, not +2. You're paying an extra movement point to attack into terrain in the poor weather. The tank assets, if they're used on the first unit, on the prime attacker, they're worth +1 rather than +2. So there are already a number of negatives built into the system, and it just seems that the -2 for the weather is a real killer. I mean, you may take the odd hex or two over an entire front line. Don't know. Possibly need to play it again as is, see whether I get a similar type of result, and then maybe consider trying it with a -1 for the poor weather. Maybe that was tried and they found that it favoured the Germans too much early on, and they were able to romp away with a successful game because there was nothing there to really hold them back. And maybe that's what the weather's there to do, is to act as a sort of a force breaker where it just evens things out. So the only issue I've got is that, you know, not much tends to happen on those turns, and you're almost just waiting around trying to tread water to get to the next break in the weather to push on with the game. But that's a minor point, which can be, I guess you can, if you wish to go a bit off-piste, you can do as you wish and try these things out. So, but it doesn't take away anything from what I think is a very, very well designed game. There's been a lot of thought put into this to get all the systems and subsystems meshing very well together. The combat system's very clean. Lots of nice decisions you have to make, and even playing at solitaire, should I commit one of my asset markers or not is still some sort of tough choices, and you end up trying to see it from both points of view. But a tremendous effort. I don't know what Sal's doing next, but I shall certainly be keeping my eyes focused on what he's thinking about designing for his next production. So that's a wrap up. Few shots of the what's left of the Third Reich, and if you've been following it, thanks for watching. I apologise for the glare. It's difficult to try and get a view that doesn't get completely overpowered by the reflection of the perspex. But this is Western Front. You can see the Allies have essentially pushed up against the western frontier of Germany. They were able to capture Strasbourg, with at least the British forces did, but the 6th SS Army took that back. The main success, as mentioned in the chat, was actually going up through Italy. So you can see the convoys at the bottom of Italy, which are supplying the drive up through Italy. Allies just managed to take and hold Munich, which is the only German city in the Allied hands, and this is the Russian southern sector. They're going into Yugoslavia, pushing up against Hungary, and at the top here, this is where the Germans got the jump on the Russians in July, used their surprise attack, and the combination of 11th SS and 3rd Panzer Army managed to destroy 2 or 3 Russian mechanized units, including one Guards tank army, which basically soaked up the air from both sides, which left the Russians a little bit short to do too much up in the north for their last turn. So there you are, Germany's still looking pretty clear, and that was 26 national will left for the Germans.